For months, people wondered why Eric Carroll kept repeating the same line every time he talked about the Whittakers. "You don't know how much it costs to do what I do. I'm out thousands. I had to pay out of pocket. I didn't get reimbursed. This work isn't free." He said it so many times that some viewers stopped questioning it. They assumed the man really was losing money, traveling state to state, helping families, and paying for everything himself. But then the receipts, or lack of receipts, began showing up. Viewers started cross-checking his timelines, comparing videos, and matching statements he made on Dad Talk with what he said on the Whittaker channel. For the first time, people noticed something strange. Eric wasn't losing money. He was making a lot of it. And the trip he claimed cost him $10,000 didn't cost him anything close to that. The cracks started forming when viewers revisited the now infamous July 31st livestream he posted while sitting in Idaho, complaining about airline fees, begging for donations, and bragging about how easy it is to make money when he covers the Whittakers. He said it all himself, completely unaware that every sentence revealed more than he intended. He had just arrived for the John Mass trial verdict. He talked about being stranded in Denver, about paying for multiple rebookings, about being out thousands of dollars. But as more and more people listened carefully, they noticed he never actually explained where the money went. No flight details. No hotel receipts. No breakdown of expenses. Nothing. Just vague outrage and constant fundraising. And then he dropped the line that changed everything. "I had to rebook tickets 3 times. I didn't get a refund. I'm highly ticked off." For an ordinary traveler making a last-minute change, maybe it could happen once. Maybe a second time. But 3 times? At full price? Without any documentation? And then, rather conveniently, he immediately followed it by asking for donations, reminding viewers how much he needed their help to continue his work. But the more he explained, the less believable his story became. Viewers began noticing how his tone changed whenever the subject turned back to the Whittakers. Suddenly he wasn't struggling anymore. Suddenly he was talking about opportunities and huge potential and easy money. He even told his 2 companions, Dwayne and David, that he planned to spend the next couple of weeks back in West Virginia because the Whittaker crowd donated more generously. He didn't just hint at it. He said it plainly. "I can go do something with nowhere near the meaning of what we're doing today, way more successful, easier to do, nowhere near the effort. People help when it comes to this movement, dude." He wasn't talking about Dad Talk. He made that clear. Dad Talk wasn't paying the bills. He said so multiple times. The views were low. The donations were low. He knew the numbers were nothing compared to the Whittaker videos. But the Whittakers, especially Timmy, brought in the money. Tens of thousands of dollars every month. And in that July 31st livestream, he practically admitted that the only reason he kept coming back was because the Whittaker audience was so quick to donate. What he didn't expect was for viewers to go back and piece the timeline together. Eric visits the Whittakers, records a massive batch of videos, and leaves with skyrocketing views. He flies home and does almost no work on Dad Talk, or anything else, for weeks. July. No new Whittaker videos. No progress on his promised projects. No house hunting. No double wide. No barn remodel. No plans for the family he claimed he was devoted to. He did one Dad Talk podcast about Hulk Hogan's passing. That was it. Yet he kept calling himself a full-time content creator. Then July 21st arrives, and YouTube deposits his first major payment from the Whittaker videos. Viewers estimate it was several $1,000s, if not more. That same day, Patrick pled guilty to his charges back home. 10 days later, Eric is sitting in Idaho bragging about how many celebrities he knows, how people rush up to shake his hand, and how Dwayne and David should admire what a big deal he is. But despite being such a big deal, he was supposedly stranded in Denver without enough money to get home. Viewers noticed how odd that was. A man pulling in tens of thousands of dollars from viral videos shouldn't be begging strangers to pay for his flight. Unless, of course, the money went somewhere he didn't want to talk about. And that suspicion grew when he complained, again, that he needed donations to fund his return to the Whittakers. Not once did he mention that YouTube had just paid him. Not once did he acknowledge the massive bump in revenue. Instead, he acted as though he were broke, desperate, helpless, and in need of rescue. And he used that desperation to justify why he had to go back to the Whittakers for 2 more weeks. I gotta eat. My family's gotta eat. To many viewers, that line changed everything. Eric wasn't doing charity work. He wasn't rescuing anyone. He wasn't fighting for the forgotten or lending a hand to the vulnerable. He was feeding himself first. And the Whittakers were the ones providing the food. The first major red flag came when he described his travel costs. According to Eric, the trip cost him $10,000, an astronomical claim that didn't match even the most exaggerated airline prices. It wasn't a business trip overseas. It wasn't an extended stay in a major city. It wasn't an emergency evacuation. It was a domestic flight, booked by a man who had already shown he knew how to travel cheaply when he wanted to. Yet now, somehow, it was $10,000. What made the claim even more unbelievable was that Eric couldn't explain the number. He couldn't list expenses. He couldn't show receipts. He simply threw out a figure and expected everyone to take him at his word. And for a while they did. Donations poured in. People wanted to help. People believed that their money was going toward filming equipment, travel costs, and work that would directly benefit the Whittakers. But when viewers asked what exactly Eric had done with the money, there was no answer. No documentation. No transparency. No proof. Nothing. The Whittakers themselves started to question him. They asked where the donations went. They asked why promises weren't kept. They asked why the barn wasn't renovated, why the double-wide didn't arrive, why the supplies never showed up, why the projects he announced online never materialized in real life. Eric, as always, had excuses. He was stranded. He was busy. He was overwhelmed. He was out of pocket. He was underappreciated. He was doing everything he could. But the Whittakers weren't seeing results. They weren't seeing improvements. They weren't seeing deliveries. They weren't seeing the $10,000 trip pay off in any meaningful way. What they were seeing was a man who showed up with cameras, collected views, collected donations, collected praise, and then disappeared, leaving them with empty promises and unfinished work. And when they confronted him, silently at first, then more openly, he didn't apologize. He got angry. He blamed them. He blamed BJ. He blamed Larry. He blamed anyone who threatened his version of the story. And that hostile shift marked the turning point. The moment the Whittakers no longer cooperated, Eric no longer behaved like a friend or a helper. He behaved like someone protecting an investment, not a family. He began accusing them of things that never appeared in his earlier videos. Suddenly their home was unsafe. Suddenly they were being abused. Suddenly he was the only one who could save them. It wasn't genuine concern. It was retaliation. And viewers could see it. That's when people realized the truth. Eric didn't deliver anything because delivering wasn't the goal. The goal was to look like he delivered. The goal was to raise money, not use it. The goal was to stay in control, not help the family regain independence. The Whittakers never asked for this chaos. They never asked to be weaponized in someone else's income stream. But once they stopped being profitable, once they stopped feeding Eric's narrative, once they stopped making him the hero, he turned on them. And in turning on them, he exposed the very thing he tried hardest to hide. There was never a $10,000 trip. There was only a $10,000 payday. And the family he claimed to love never saw a penny of it. As you listen to this unraveling of the timeline, ask yourself, who benefited from the donations? Who walked away with the money? And why did the Whittakers end up with nothing? Hey everyone, before we get into the next part, I've got something special to share with you. If you're all about making your home smarter, cozier, and just a little bit more you, then you've got to check this out. We've partnered with Trekbo.com, a place built for people who love clever solutions and everyday comfort. From wellness and skincare must-haves to smart home gadgets, heated gear, and lifestyle tech, Trekbo is packed with products that make life easier, warmer, and way more fun. I've personally picked some of my favorite finds, things that actually work, look great, and make your day smoother. Whether it's something to simplify your morning routine, help you unwind after a long day, or bring a little innovation into your home, you'll find it there. So before you scroll past, take a quick look at Trekbo.com. Trust me, it's full of discoveries waiting to make your everyday better. Alright, now let's get back to it, because after this video, you're definitely going to want to explore what Trekbo has in store for the Whittaker household community. When people first started revisiting the timeline, they noticed how neatly everything fit together once Eric's own words were placed side by side. What had looked scattered and chaotic suddenly became a pattern, one that repeated itself every time Eric sensed he was losing control of the narrative. The timeline, starting in late June, through July, and into August, revealed a striking truth. Eric's money problems always appeared at the exact moment he needed an excuse to ask for more. And every time he said he was broke, a flood of donations appeared. Yet not once did the Whittakers receive the help he promised. That July 31st live stream became the centerpiece. People kept replaying it, not because it was entertaining, but because it exposed his mindset more clearly than anything he'd ever said. For nearly an hour, he toggled back and forth between asking for money and bragging about his connections. He talked about celebrities, his big platform, his importance in the dad talk world, then immediately contradicted himself by saying dad talk wasn't paying enough for him to survive. Viewers got whiplash listening to him try to be both successful and struggling at the same time. But the real giveaway came when he started discussing his plans for August. He said it casually, almost like it was an inside joke between him, Dwayne, and David. Next couple weeks, I'm gonna have to work on stuff outside of dad talk because I have to make a living. He didn't say he had a new job lined up. He didn't say he had a project he was passionate about. He didn't say he had any work waiting for him. He said it right after bragging about how much the Whittaker supporters donated. The meaning was unmistakable. When Eric said work, he meant go back to the Whittakers. Turn on the camera. Get paid again. The Whittakers weren't people to him. They were income. And once that realization clicked, viewers began reinterpreting everything he did afterward. Suddenly, the $10,000 travel claim didn't sound like the complaint of a man who overspent. It sounded like the setup for his next fundraising round. Suddenly, the rushed return to West Virginia didn't feel heroic. It felt opportunistic. Suddenly, the accusations he threw at BJ didn't seem protective. They seemed strategic. Because the moment he believed BJ was out of the picture, he acted like everything was fine. The family wasn't unsafe in June. The family wasn't unsafe in July. The only time the situation became an emergency was when the woman he saw as an obstacle walked back into the frame. And when she returned, the narrative flipped overnight. He stopped talking about the fun outings. He stopped showing bonding moments. He stopped highlighting the family's strengths. He stopped praising their resilience. Instead, he began painting them as helpless, chaotic, and abusive. It didn't matter that he had never said any of these things before. It didn't matter that the family members never described themselves this way. It didn't matter that none of his accusations appeared in earlier footage. The only thing that mattered to him was that this new storyline justified his goal, taking Timmy home with him. People began going back through his older videos. They noticed how fixated he was on Timmy from the beginning. They noticed how he always positioned himself as the one who understood Timmy best. They noticed the way he spoke about Timmy's future, as if it were already decided. He didn't describe possibilities. He described plans. And in those plans, Timmy lived with him. Once that clicked, everything else clicked with it. Why demonize BJ? She was an adult capable of caring for her son. Why attack Larry? He was the most stable figure in Timmy's life. Why undermine Betty? She was the emotional center of the entire household. Eric needed all three of them to look incompetent in order to justify bypassing them. If even one adult in the home seemed stable, Eric had no grounds to claim custody, or even to imply he should be considered. So he began crafting a narrative of instability. He didn't start with accusations of abuse. That would have been too obvious, too sudden, too suspicious. Instead, he started with small things. Betty and Larry aren't answering their phone. BJ won't let me talk to them. I think something is wrong over there. He used vague language. He used emotional appeal. He used fear to stir concern in his audience. And once that fear took root, he escalated. Suddenly BJ was dangerous. Suddenly Larry was afraid. Suddenly the house was unlivable. Suddenly the family was in immediate danger. Yet none of these claims appeared in any footage taken before August 24th. Not one. And that is what made people finally stop and look closer. If the situation was truly dangerous, why didn't he mention it earlier? Why didn't he contact authorities during his first visit? Why were his early videos so cheerful and lighthearted? Why did he film them laughing, playing, shopping, and joking together? Why didn't he express concern until the exact moment BJ refused to cooperate? Slowly, the truth became harder to ignore. The danger wasn't real. The urgency wasn't real. The gas money crisis wasn't real. The fear he attributed to Larry wasn't real. The blackmail accusation didn't come from the family. It came from him. People also noticed something else. Whenever Eric needed more donations, the drama escalated. Whenever the drama escalated, the story became more fantastical. And whenever the story became more fantastical, he leaned harder into portraying himself as Timmy's only hope. It was a cycle that repeated again and again. The Whittakers never asked him to fight for them. They never asked him to rescue them. They never asked him to intervene in their personal lives. All they wanted was what he promised: help with their home, help with repairs, help with housing, help with basic needs. Instead, they got used as props. They provided the content. Their lives generated the views. Their struggles pulled in donations. Their vulnerability created emotional leverage. But they saw none of the results. The closer viewers looked, the more they realized the Whittakers had been left with absolutely nothing. No repaired barn. No new home. No consistent follow-up. No real assistance. Nothing but accusations and tension. Meanwhile, Eric left with a huge YouTube payout, massive Facebook donations, GoFundMe contributions, travel reimbursements, and thousands of dollars raised for the family that never reached them. The more this truth surfaced, the more people began turning against him, not because someone else told them to, but because the evidence came from his own mouth. The Whittakers themselves eventually confronted him, quietly at first, confused, wondering why he promised things he never delivered, wondering why he kept blaming them publicly, wondering why he kept twisting their private lives into content. And instead of answering, he turned their questions into more ammunition. Suddenly their doubt became betrayal. Suddenly their boundaries became manipulation. Suddenly their independence became danger. That shift, the moment he stopped pretending, was when the family realized they weren't dealing with a friend. They were dealing with someone who needed them only as long as they made him money. Now the conversation shifted online. What exactly did he spend the $10,000 on? Why didn't the family see any of it? Why did he show up broke if he just received a massive YouTube payout? Why did the Whittakers have empty promises while Eric had full pockets? Those questions became louder as more contradictions surfaced. And eventually, the Whittakers themselves began speaking, carefully, quietly, but truthfully. What they revealed shook the entire narrative. As you hear this unfolding, ask yourself, if the money was truly for the family, why did the family receive nothing? Who do you believe, the people living the story, or the man profiting from it? As more people pieced together the timeline, the simplest question became the loudest. Where did the money go? It should have been an easy question to answer. Eric was the one who said publicly, repeatedly, that he received over $10,000 in donations during his trips. He was the one who claimed he covered travel costs out of pocket. He was the one who insisted that every dollar was accounted for. Yet when viewers combed through his live streams, his numbers never matched. One day he said he spent $2,000 on travel. Another day he said it was $5,000. Then suddenly the figure became $10,000. Then, more than that. The amount shifted so often it became impossible not to notice. And while the numbers changed constantly, one thing never changed at all. The Whittakers never received the financial help they were promised. People who donated began comparing notes. They had receipts showing exactly where their money went. PayPal, hashtag, YouTube Super Chats, Facebook Stars, all under Eric's name. Not a single donation link went directly to the family. Everything funneled through him. And that meant everything depended on his honesty. When viewers realized this, they began reviewing his live streams with a different eye. Suddenly, the things he once said casually now read like confessions. He'd often complain about being stranded at airports, about losing money, about needing more funds to continue helping the Whittakers. Yet the expenses he described didn't come close to the amount he collected. His own words made that clear. During one live stream, he admitted the Airbnb fundraiser alone brought in more than a month of YouTube income, which he claimed was around $40,000. The problem was simple. The Airbnb was never used by the Whittakers. Not one night. Not 1 minute. Timmy slept there a few times. The rest of the time, Eric and his friends used it. The family never stepped foot inside. The footage backed this up. The dates backed this up. The donations backed this up. But Eric insisted the Airbnb was for the family, and he said it with enough confidence that many believed him until the truth surfaced. One supporter summed it up bluntly in a comment that later went viral. Eric didn't rent an Airbnb for the Whittakers. He rented a vacation for himself and made us pay for it. That realization shifted everything. Once people recognized how much money he was keeping, they started reassessing the motives behind his behavior. And the more they reassessed, the more his contradictions began piling up. He claimed the Whittaker supporters were donating far more than Dad Talk supporters. He admitted the Whittaker videos were the most financially successful content he'd produced in years. He openly told Dwayne and David he needed to go where the money is. And he repeatedly emphasized how easy the Whittaker content was to make. That combination created a concerning picture. He wasn't there to help the family. He was there to sustain his income. And once that clicked, people began noticing details they had previously overlooked. For example, during the July 31st live stream, he said he had done nothing but Dad Talk for years, Yet the upload history showed long gaps of inactivity. He insisted he was a full-time content creator, yet he hadn't produced consistent content in months. He claimed his platform was huge before meeting the Whittakers, yet the numbers didn't reflect that at all. Everything pointed back to one uncomfortable truth. Eric needed the Whittakers more than they ever needed him. And the family would eventually see this for themselves. The breaking point. The tension between the Whittakers and Eric didn't explode overnight. It built gradually, quietly, beneath the surface. During the early visits, they looked happy. They laughed. They rode around. They trusted him. And Eric filmed every second of it. But the moment he started demanding control over their lives, everything changed. He began staying longer. He began involving himself in decisions that weren't his. He began pushing the narrative that the family was incapable of functioning without him. At first, they brushed it off as overenthusiasm. But then the tone shifted. He started making subtle comments about taking Timmy home. He began framing himself as Timmy's protector. He portrayed BJ as dangerous, Larry as helpless, Betty as overwhelmed. And he did it publicly. The family watched as strangers online suddenly treated them like villains in their own story because Eric told them to. They saw comments calling them abusive, negligent, unfit, ignorant. They saw his followers demanding that APS step in. They saw themselves being erased while Eric wrote a new script about their lives. That was the moment the Whittakers pulled back. They stopped answering calls as often. They stopped letting him film everything. They stopped cooperating with the storyline he was crafting. And that's when the accusations began. On August 24th, Eric declared that the situation was an emergency. He said he needed to rush back. He said the family was in danger. He said the phone was being held hostage. But as viewers later pointed out, he was still communicating with multiple family members the entire time. He was texting. He was calling. He was receiving updates. The story didn't add up unless he needed it to add up. When he returned to West Virginia, things escalated quickly. He claimed BJ blackmailed Larry. He claimed Larry was terrified. He claimed the environment was unsafe. He claimed the adults were incompetent. He claimed he was the only one who could intervene. But the family contradicted him again and again. Larry never said he was afraid. Betty never said she was overwhelmed. BJ never said she manipulated anyone. Timmy never said he wanted to leave. Every allegation came from Eric, not from the people living the story. Then as more information emerged, something became painfully clear. Eric wasn't reacting to a crisis. He was creating one. The more resistant the family became, the more dramatic his accusations. The more viewers questioned him, the louder he became. The more money he needed, the more dangerous the situation suddenly appeared. And then when APS finally stepped in, after weeks of Eric calling and pressuring them, he framed it as validation of his narrative. He never acknowledged that APS responded because he harassed them. He never acknowledged that his exaggerated claims pushed the agency into action. He never acknowledged that his portrayal of the family created the situation. He only said it proved he was right. But the trail of contradictions, live streams, and receipts told a different story, one where his actions weren't noble at all. Instead, they looked calculated. The family speaks. It took time for the Whittakers to process what had happened. They were hurt, confused, and betrayed, not only by the loss of their privacy, but by the way Eric weaponized their trust. Eventually, quietly, they began telling their side. They revealed that the repairs never came. They revealed that the home he promised was never pursued. They revealed that the donations never reached them. They revealed that the accusations were never discussed with them. They revealed that the urgency existed only in Eric's words. And they revealed something else, something that broke many supporters' hearts. They thought he was genuinely helping them. They believed him. They trusted him. They didn't realize until too late that he was helping himself. Their account didn't come with theatrics or emotional manipulation. It came from a place of exhaustion. Not anger, just sadness. They didn't want to fight. They didn't want drama. They didn't want revenge. They just wanted the truth out. Do you think the family realized too late what Eric was really after? Or do you believe they saw the warning signs long before the public did? Let me know your thoughts below. As the truth continued to spread, the public's perception of Eric shifted from admiration to suspicion. What once appeared to be generosity began to look like strategy. What once seemed like loyalty revealed itself as dependency. And what once sounded like concern now read like manipulation orchestrated for financial gain. The heart of the controversy settled around one question that refused to die. Why did Eric keep promising the Whittakers help he never delivered, while collecting thousands in their name? People began replaying live streams from the very beginning, searching for signs they had missed. That was when patterns emerged. Patterns that painted a far more deliberate picture than anyone expected. Eric didn't simply forget to help the family. He didn't get distracted. He didn't misunderstand their needs. He repeatedly promised life-changing improvements because the promises brought in money. And once the donations arrived, the promises evaporated. Viewers noted how the same cycle appeared every time. He would launch into an emotional plea about how badly the family needed something: a home upgrade, a vehicle, medical supplies, repairs. Donations would pour in. He would disappear for weeks. Nothing changed for the family. Then he would reappear with a new emergency, a new crisis, a new storyline designed to reignite sympathy and generate the next wave of contributions. Once you saw the cycle, it was impossible to unsee. Supporters began questioning why Eric spent so much time talking about the hardships of travel, the cost of airline tickets, the price of rental cars, and the strain of hotels, yet never once showed documentation for a single expense. Every dollar he complained about losing somehow justified seeking more donations. But no one could track where the tens of thousands actually went. Meanwhile, the family lived the same way they had before he ever appeared. No house repairs. No appliances. No improvements. No follow-through. Nothing but more exposure and more stress. For a man who claimed to be their advocate, he had remarkably little to show for it. The turning tide. Things changed when viewers began sharing clips of Eric contradicting himself. The evidence circulated faster than he could outrun it. In one moment he insisted he didn't make money from YouTube. In another he bragged about how lucrative the Whittaker videos were. In one moment he claimed he didn't need the Whittakers to boost his platform. In another he admitted he was broke without them. The inconsistencies stacked so high they collapsed under their own weight. Then came the realization that would shift public opinion permanently. Eric pocketed donations that were explicitly meant for the family. People who contributed under the belief that their money was going toward a home, repairs, or necessities discovered it had gone toward Eric's travel, hotels, gear, and personal expenses. Worse, some donors learned their contributions were used on non-Whittaker trips, content unrelated to the family entirely. When this evidence surfaced, betrayal hit hard. Some had given $5. Some had given $500. Some had given more than they could afford. All believed they were helping the Whittakers. None realized they were funding Eric. The emotional backlash was intense, but for many viewers the real heartbreak came from comparing Eric's lifestyle to the Whittakers. While the family still struggled daily, Eric was traveling nationwide, staying in rentals, eating out, and upgrading equipment, all while lamenting that he was barely getting by. Each contradiction weakened his credibility further, and each revelation strengthened the family's voice. The family's breaking silence. It took months before the Whittakers spoke openly about what happened. They were not confrontational by nature. Their instinct was to protect, to avoid conflict, to trust. But trust has limits, even for the kindest hearts. They slowly admitted that they had never received the things they were promised. The home repairs never started. The appliances never arrived. The insulation never happened. The barn home never materialized. The double-wide trailer was never pursued. Every improvement Eric said he was organizing existed only in live streams, not in reality. Supporters were stunned. They had watched Eric speak confidently about plans, blueprints, budgets, and timelines. They assumed progress was being made behind the scenes. Instead, the family revealed that weeks and months passed with no communication, no updates, no visits, no work. He disappeared after every fundraising wave. And that made the truth even harder to ignore. The more money Eric made, the less he appeared in their lives. The family described feeling confused, unsure of why he stopped returning calls. They didn't understand why promises kept breaking. They didn't want to accuse him of anything. They simply wanted answers. But the longer they waited, the more obvious the pattern became. They realized that Eric only returned when a new problem needed to be filmed, a new accusation needed to be made, a new drama could generate views, a new fundraising push was needed. Once the footage was captured, once the live stream was done, once the donations were collected, he was gone again. What made this even more painful was how genuinely they had welcomed him. They had opened their home, their lives, their vulnerabilities, believing he intended to uplift them. Instead, they were thrust into a cycle of exploitation disguised as advocacy. For the first time, supporters realized the Whittakers had been used, not helped. The public's verdict. As the evidence piled up, Eric's explanations grew weaker. He blamed airlines. He blamed lost receipts. He blamed scheduling conflicts. He blamed miscommunication. He blamed misunderstandings. Anyone and anything became a scapegoat as long as it diverted attention from his accountability. But the public didn't buy it anymore. People began pointing out how he frequently exaggerated costs, how his descriptions of travel inconvenience aligned perfectly with new donation pushes, how every crisis conveniently appeared when funds ran low, and how each new storyline positioned him as the hero in need of support. One viewer summarized the sentiment clearly. The Whittakers didn't fail Eric. Eric failed the Whittakers. And he failed the donors who trusted him. Others were more direct. He didn't go to help them. He went to monetize them. As more people spoke out, the tide turned completely. Those who once defended him began distancing themselves. Those who once hesitated to criticize began asking harder questions. Those who once donated started demanding refunds or proof of where their money went. Eric had insisted for months that he was the only one telling the truth. But now, the truth was telling itself. And it wasn't on his side. The family finally heard. The Whittakers, who had been pushed into silence by pressure and confusion, finally found their voice not through confrontation but through clarity. They didn't need arguments or accusations. The facts spoke for them. The timeline spoke for them. The donations spoke for them. The absence of delivered help spoke for them. And viewers listened. Support poured in. Real support, direct support, transparent support. People approached the family with respect instead of demands. They offered help without strings attached. They began undoing the damage caused by months of misinformation. For the first time, the Whittakers weren't characters in Eric's storyline. They were people again. People who deserved dignity, honesty, and support without exploitation. The entire situation exposed a much larger issue. When outsiders turn vulnerable families into content, the line between help and harm becomes dangerously thin. Eric crossed that line repeatedly. And the world finally saw it. Do you think Eric's actions were intentional from the beginning, or do you believe he lost control as the donations grew? Share your thoughts below. This story has sparked huge debate, and your perspective matters. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.